Welcome to TypeScript FM, the friendly podcast for TypeScript developers where we bring you news, updates, and interviews from the community with plenty of tomfoolery sprinkled in. I'm your host, Kamran, and I'm joined by my co-host and best bud, Eric Onerheim. Together, we're the two TypeScript fools. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Eric?
You know, I am extremely tired.
Yeah?
For a couple of reasons. I did a game jam this last weekend. So
yeah.
I spent 72 hours doing Ludum Dare 58, and we made a game. It's called Gem Jam, where
Sweet.
You are a dwarf digging deep into the earth to mine for riches and avoid critters and collect as many gems as possible. It turned out really well, and the team did a fantastic job. I didn't do any of the art, so the team did the art, and
That's
then
cool.
We had an audio engineer do all of the audio, and I gotta say, I think this is the best audio in a game that we've made.
That's awesome.
It's pretty impressive when someone knows what they're doing. It's doing your audio. It's pretty cool. But yeah, and then the other reason is Maeve is going through like maybe a growth spurt or something, but she is not sleeping well. So you know how that is. I don't need to. When she not sleeping well, we not sleeping well.
Yep, that's right.
So that's kind of what we're in for right now. And then yesterday, I was just on a video call from morning until evening. Like I did not leave this chair. I was on camera the entire day.
Oh my God.
Yep.
That doesn't sound like fun.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't fun.
So we'll obviously include the link to Jam Jam in the show notes so you can go play it, and I will play it afterwards. And right now it's in voting, right? So people can vote on how they feel about the game. And when voting ends, we'll see where it ranks, right?
That's right. And you can only vote if you submitted a game. So it's not like a public vote.
Mm-hmm.
If you participated, you can rate games. So it's kind of like a community for community situation. And we've done okay in the past. I've got my hopes up because I feel like this went really well. Maybe in our top 3. It's not our top 1 because I know which one that is, but I think it's definitely in the top 3 of things that we've executed, and I feel really good about it.
Nice. Well, that sounds super fun. So you had a really, really fun weekend.
Yeah, I've totally cooked my brain. Like I am completely mush.
Yep. Cool. Well, I did something a little nuts last week. After the Minnesota Long Goodbye discussion we had on the last episode, which was prompted by the moving off of TypeScript article where they're moving to C# and .NET. I mean, that is my stack right now for keep track of my games. It has a React front end, but it's a multi-page app. So it loads up the bundles on the client side, and when you're on the page, then it becomes a single page application, right? So the transitions between the different routes are on the server. And that's because .NET can't support SSR until now.
Dun, dun, dun.
So what I did was, and I
got nerd sniped.
I had done some research on this before because I had wanted to try to solve this problem. Like, how can I have my .NET server support rendering my React front end in SSR so that I could deliver people the HTML that they need on page load? Because that's huge. I mean, that's for accessibility. That's for, better performance. That's for everything. Like, server rendered HTML is much better than client side only. Yeah. So anyway, I had done previous research, and it didn't seem like it was possible. And if it was possible, it was super slow because the traditional approaches would be like spawn up a node.exe and run it through there. But that still doesn't work because from SSR, I need to be able to call back into .NET so that I can call my services to like fetch data from the database. Otherwise, all I'm doing is still doing like a fetch to an API, except that it's hidden inside of a child process. So that never was going to work. So I just like tabled it and been like, okay, this is not really going to be possible. Now I've figured it out, and we'll talk about it later. I want to tease this. Okay. So we'll talk about it when we get to the community stuff, because I do have an open source repo now, so I can point you to it. And so I'll talk about exactly kind of what I did and where it's at right now.
Looks cool.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it looks super cool.
Other than that, I did sneak in 2 courses. So I published 2 courses last week. They're like micro short form courses. They're like 6 minutes long, 5 minutes long. And one is about the Pomodoro technique for staying on task. And then the other one is prioritizing work with rocks, pebbles, and sand, which is just a mental model for how to put the big things first in your day. So you probably can't check that out unless you're a Pluralsight subscriber, but you can just Google those topics and you will get the gist. And then we got a new mattress over the weekend. So
How you doing with that?
extremely excited about that. It's so good.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, my sleep has just leveled up like 10 times overnight. It's really good.
Life improvement by a percentage point or 2?
Yeah. In fact, something at the retreat that we talked about, one of the things that we do at the very end is like, what are like some short-term actions you can take to improve your life by 20 to 30%? And so one of the things that we had been talking about, me and my wife, was like, our mattress is old. Like when we wake up, our back is sore. Like that is not good, right? And so we just bit the bullet, and I said, this is going to improve our quality of life at least by 20 to 30%. Let's just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did it, and it has. It's amazing.
Yeah.
We also upgraded to a king size from a queen.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
you want to have like, there could be like a whole like war happening on the other side of that mattress and you wouldn't know about it.
Yep. And that's perfect because our littlest one, if she wakes up during the night, she'll get out of her bed and come into ours. And so it was even worse those nights when she would get in. And like I'm like scrunched up on one side of the bed. So now she did it like last night, or not last night, a couple nights ago. And I barely even noticed. Like it was great.
Barely an inconvenience.
Yes.
I've always said the thing to spend money on is anything that's between you and the ground.
Yep. That's exactly right. And we did that for camping too. We got camp cots. Oh, so much better than being on the ground. So much better.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I can't do the thermarest anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Let's move on to the news for the week of September 29th, 2025. And this episode is coming to you a little bit later in the week because Eric had a game jam and I didn't want to interrupt his flow state.
Also, my noodle was baked.
Yes, which makes a lot of sense. Cool. So there was something interesting in the TSGo news corner. I spotted a PR, number 1732, that is a performance PR. And this is kind of neat. In the current version of TypeScript, there's, the parse file, source file step that TSC does. And it does like 2 separate passes, and that increases the build time. And so in TSGo, they just merged a PR to remove that extra pass. So that actually, Anders was saying that it improves source file parse time by at least 10%. So that's pretty cool. So that performance improvement is not going to be backported to Strata, to the current version of TypeScript, but it will be there in TSGo and TS7. So that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep. So that's just a little thing that snuck by. I don't think anyone mentioned it anywhere, but I saw it and I thought that was cool.
That's super cool.
Now, in the past few episodes, we have been talking about NPM supply chain attacks, right? And I think in the previous episode, we shared NPM's plan to mitigate supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
So Deno has, of course, come out with their own blog post on how Deno protects against NPM exploits.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a chance to read through it?
No, but I do know everything in this blog post. So this is again, maybe if you are like an enterprise architect, or you're a person concerned with security, this might be a reason to pick Deno.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're just using Deno for the CLI and not necessarily as a runtime.
Yep.
It's secure by default. So what does that mean? Well, they don't allow scripts to run against your operating system. They run in a sandbox unless you give them explicit grant permissions. So like by default, a Deno program can't read or write files on the system, can't open network connections and send or receive data. They can't access environment variables, which is a common exploit to squirrel away keys. They can't spawn more processes or run other programs.
Mm-hmm.
So this means that if you're using Deno with NPM, you're protected.
Yes. And they don't run post-install scripts by default either, which is a vector for all these malware that inject stuff during the post-install phase. And I think PNPM is also safe in that regard. I don't think it does that by default, and neither does Bun. So pretty much everything except NPM. There is a flag for NPM, but it's not on by default. So that seems like a misstep. But anyway, one interesting thing in the blog post is they mentioned, like PNPM, they are going to be adding an option to the Deno CLI to filter packages by age, or I think in your Deno config, something like that. You can go check out the linked pull request that they have. But similarly, basically, you'll be able to say, don't install packages unless they are above this age, like a cooldown period. And then the other interesting thing is one of the rails against JavaScript is that it doesn't have a standard library, but that's not really true anymore because Deno does have a standard library and it's fully compatible with all the runtimes. It's just written in vanilla JavaScript. And so there's no dependencies or anything like that. And you can just import them from JSR and add them to your package JSON. So you can do that with just a regular Node project. You don't even have to be using Deno. So that way you don't have to take in all these tiny little dependencies that do things.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all in the standard library.
Yeah, some interesting things. They were kind of ahead of the curve on this, like trusted publishing is they required authors to do an OAuth flow in order to approve package publishing. They already did provenance statements as well. So it makes it harder. I mean, certainly you could still fish a maintainer, but they don't use tokens for publishing. You must do the OAuth flow.
Yep. Yeah, JSR doesn't even support tokens. It's just built with provenance and OAuth from the beginning. And by the way, you can install JSR packages, like I said, in your Node project. You just do npx JSR and then add blah, 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 or install blah, 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 the package name. That NPM supports package prefixes that tell you like what registry it is or, where to go get the package, including like GitHub or the file system or things like that, which you don't use too often, but I have used in the past. But the same thing applies to JSR. So NPM can still go fetch packages from JSR if you use the npx JSR command.
Yeah, and that's because JSR speaks the NPM protocol.
Yep.
So
cool stuff. So that means that if you wanted to just switch over to JSR as your package registry and just do away with NPM totally, you could do that. That's possible. Probably wouldn't do it unless, you had more control over your ecosystem. But I think for companies and enterprises, it's pretty compelling. So you can go check out that blog post for, more of those details. But that's basically the too long didn't read.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely check that out. And if you haven't had a candid conversation with your people in your company about supply chain security, you should. And next up, we have DBOSS. I believe that's how you pronounce it. DBOSS 2.0, which adds JavaScript support with a decoratorless API.
Yeah. So what is DBOSS? And I didn't even know, like when you sent this to me, I was like, oh, that's cool. But what is DBOSS? So it does not stand for Database Operating System.
Yeah.
What it is a way to add durability to serverless functions through annotations. So basically it's a library, and if you have it supports like Python, TypeScript, and Go serverless APIs. So let's say you got like a function declaration. What you used to be able to do, or can still do, is you can add a decorator above that function that's like, make it durable. And then it'll add the ability to retry. It'll add the ability to do exponential backup and just things like that. And it's pretty cool. But that JavaScript API only supported decorators, which we know are not stage 4 yet. They're not fully out there yet.
Yeah, they're not 100% yet.
They're not 100% yet. So you could not use DBOSS without using decorators. And so that was kind of painful for the developer experience. So now in DBOSS 2.0, they announced that they added JavaScript support with a decoratorless API. So that also means that the TypeScript API got an update. So you can use it without experimental decorators turned on.
Yeah. So this is a framework, I'll call it.
Yeah.
A workflow engine for reliably handling failures. So, for example, if you have a saga where you need a lot of async things to happen in a specific order, and you need to make sure that you can like checkpoint in between and you're always in a known state, this is something to maybe reach for.
Yeah, and neither of us have used DBOSS. The episode is not sponsored by them, but
No.
I did link to the docs, so you can go check it out. But I mean, we like to bring visibility to cool tools that support TypeScript, and this is one of them.
Yeah, and this is something that I might be reaching for because I have need of implementing a saga in my day job.
Mm-hmm.
So this might be something to look at.
Yeah. Okay. There was also something in Meta Framework news. Astro did not have a new release, but they did have a new What's New in Astro for September. So you can go check that out. But the one thing I wanted to call out, which is kind of neat, is that they now have financial backing from Cloudflare. So they already had Netlify and Webflow as sponsors, and now they have Cloudflare, which is pretty cool. And Cloudflare is actually also sponsoring TanStack too now. So it's sort of included both TanStack and Astro. So yeah, hey guys, maybe go sponsor Excalibur.js too, huh?
Yeah, that would be cool. That'd be neat.
Excalibur.js doesn't really provide the infrastructure for the web. So that's one of their motivations to do the sponsorship.
Wouldn't it be wild if video games provided the infrastructure for the web?
Yeah, that would be cool. Maybe you got to figure out a way to do that, and then you can get really cool sponsors like that.
I have a new idea for line of business software.
Yes.
What if line of business software were controlled by gamepads? Okay.
Yep.
Company engagement is an all-time high.
That's right. True. Okay, let's do community highlights. Friend of the show, Liran had a brand new blog post on mitigating supply chain security with dev containers and 1Password for Node.js local development. This is cool because for Excalibur, we just set up a dev container so that contributors can open up Visual Studio Code, get prompted to reopen in a dev container, and they have the entire build environment set up on Docker locally for them. But Liran goes a step further and shows you how to actually set it up with secrets and keeping it out of the file system and using 1Password. And that's not something that we've needed for Excalibur because I think that the only thing that we use is a GitHub token, and that is just a thing that we can work around. Like it doesn't actually call the GitHub API in development if you don't have the token. We just ignore it. But for more sophisticated setups like a front-end app or a full-stack app, you're going to have secrets. And so Liran shows you how to set that up to help mitigate supply chain security. And the reason why it's mitigated is because they're not in your environment variables. So malicious scripts can't try to exfiltrate stuff from your local environment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's interesting here is they're using 1Password Connect to connect and retrieve the 1Password credentials. What's neat about this is following kind of your best practice where you're not using a .env file. So like you'll see this kind of thing happen in like AWS where you store your credentials in a third party like Secret Manager, or you're using like HashiCorp Vault where you're grabbing your secrets at runtime and they're never at rest in an unencrypted way. So, for example, if someone pwns your process, they have access to your environment variables and that can just squirrel those away. But if you're getting your credentials at runtime and then perhaps caching them in the variable or somewhere else, or maybe not even caching them, it's a lot harder to exploit that and exfiltrate your credentials.
Yeah. So go check that out if you want to secure your local development box. I think this is a good idea.
Yeah, one cool thing about the 1Password is you can have like different groups and roles. So you can have like a developer role. You can have like people that have different roles in your organization, and you can grant or revoke access based on like some RBAC, which seems way better than you have all of the credentials.
Mm-hmm. That's really neat. I use LastPass, but it's basically not even a desktop app. It's like a browser extension, right? And then on mobile, it's an app. But it seems like 1Password goes a step further where I can actually use it as a developer. Like I can interact with it as a dev and grab secrets, which is pretty compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think 1Password is also the only password service that hasn't had a huge breach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And part of it's because they store credentials encrypted, and you need part of the key to unlock the vault. Like the user brings part of the key in addition to a password.
Oh, cool. And you use 1Password?
I do. Yeah, I pay for 1Password.
How's the user experience of that?
It's honestly, I don't know any of my passwords.
Nice.
It's so good. I use it on Android and I use it on my browser on Windows and Linux.
Mm-hmm.
I use the browser extension. So it's just
And then
Control-Shift-X.
when it prompts you to enter your master vault, so you're saying that you also have to provide something else too?
Yeah, so that's like a one-time thing. So you
Okay.
load that into the extension.
Okay.
But you need more than just a password. So once you've loaded your part of the key, you need a password as well.
Gotcha. And you don't do that too often because LastPass will always, well, not always, but many times will prompt me for the master vault password when it runs into the time limit or whatever where it expires and I have to reset it up again.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I type that master vault password a lot. I think it's configurable, but it times out after a few minutes. But the key part is a one-time only.
Okay, the key part. Cool. That's what I was wondering. Okay, sweet. Moving on to something I saw on Reddit from Vincent Rolfe, and the date on the post is October, but the thread was posted this last week. But it's one of the top voted threads. People thought it was super interesting. I thought it was super interesting. The question is, why does the TypeScript codebase itself, why is it littered with var statements? Because nowadays, I mean, we use constant let, right, Eric?
Indeed, we do.
Why do you think, I don't know if you read the article already, but it kind of spoils it in the title, but why do you think it's littered with var statements? Why aren't they using constant let?
It probably is a optimization. Because when you use var, you're hoisting it to the top, and you don't need to reallocate like a stack space, probably. If I were to guess, it's probably some micro optimization.
Yes, that is the answer.
A total guess. I didn't read it.
So that's the answer. I don't know if that's the exact reason, because one of the things that he said is that the interpreter doesn't have to do extra work with a var keyword, but it does have to with a let or a const. Like it has to do a check of like block scoping and stuff. And so he talks about this thing called the temporal dead zone of the var keyword, of where something can be like unassigned but declared, and so it's faster with the var statement. And this is like a super micro optimization that does not mean that you should go and change all of your things to var. Please don't do that. But this is something that the TypeScript team noticed. So anyway, I think that the deep dive is pretty interesting, but you can read more about why that is.
That is absolutely wild.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
That was a total guess. That's hilarious. Go watch my talk on JavaScript performance. It does not have this advice.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it says figuring out whether it's in a variable's temporal dead zone is a lot of work for the interpreter. As you can see above, it can't be done statically, but depends on non-deterministic runtime behavior. And that brings a penalty, which was significant for the TypeScript codebase. After migrating a decent amount of their statements to var, they saw an 8% performance improvement across some benchmarks.
That is a wild.
Yeah. All right, we've got a blog post by Paul Schming, which has a slightly clickbaity headline of TypeScript and the illusion of type safety. Now, here's the thing. I read through this entire post, and it's pretty good. Now, the thing is that some of the examples are fairly contrived with I don't know how many people would run into this, but I think that it is still important to understand that the way that JavaScript runtime works, it can just mess with your type safety. Like you'll think that something might be type safe, but if you write it in a certain way with more dynamic JavaScript, it's just going to totally blow it away. So one of the examples is like enumerating all the functions on an object and then invoking them, right? So it's basically like reflection. Now, how many times do you actually have to do this? I don't know. But if you do, you just have to know that you're stepping outside of TypeScript. Like you should not be expecting any kind of safety if you're like enumerating properties manually and invoking functions manually.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things though that they do mention that is weird is that with enums, you can assign a variable that is an enum to just a plain number, and TypeScript does not check that, like it doesn't throw an error, because enums are assignable to number. Now, the thing is that I believe if you're not using the enum keyword anymore and you're migrating away from that to like an object literal and type unions and stuff, then I think that'll be safe again. And especially if you're using a string for your enum and not a number-based enum. I think that there's a way to solve that, especially without using the enum keyword. But I think it is fair to say that that is a weird thing. Like, I don't know if TypeScript really should allow you to do that.
Yeah, that's weird. I think it's maybe a holdover from like C-type enums, which were backed by numbers. So it's like a C-sharpism perhaps, or a C-ism perhaps, that led to that original decision. Although you can do string enums, which is what we do, which is kind of like halfway in between, which I recommend, because if you're ever debugging code and you're looking at the runtime value of an enum and you get the number 3, you're like, what the heck is 3?
Yep.
It auto assigns a number.
Yes.
So you're like, what's the third one in this enum? That's what it is.
Yes.
Or what the fourth one, I guess. It's 0 based. What's, or the whatever the, I'm off by 1. Whatever the right one is in your enum, which is also a foot gun, because if you ever reorder an enum and you've persisted values to a database in the old one, ask me how I know.
Yeah. I literally ran into that problem last week. So
never reorder an enum.
I mentioned that I refactored the way enums work on my TypeScript front end, because from the .NET side, it was serializing an array of enums as an array of numbers, right? Because by default, C# represents them as numbers, right? But what I can do is I can force it to serialize it as a string, the string value. And that's actually what I do in the database, because I've run into this exact same issue. When it serializes an object to the database and an enum is a number, if you reorder the numbers, now all of your database objects are referencing the wrong enum.
Yeah.
So anyway, same thing applies from the API down to your front end. That transition, make sure, at least for me, I make sure that all the enums I serialize are as strings. But that issue bit me in the butt because I didn't do it for that array specifically of enums. So
I've, in PRs, like it's the only thing that I will like I'm pretty flexible nowadays. Life is too short. But if I see like an enum in like C# and it's not initialized, I'm like, yeah, you got to initialize those, please.
Yep. Cool. Moving on to Theo GG's YouTube video that came out this past week, which was Life After TypeScript. Now, this is basically his reaction video to the article that we already covered from Motion called Moving Off of TypeScript. And we already covered our thoughts on this, but the one thing is that I had some additional thoughts after we had talked about it that we didn't really get to. And that transitions perfectly into the next thing I want to talk about. But first, Theo's take was pretty measured, I feel like, besides maybe a few, he maybe had a few hot takes on Entity Framework, which I might share personally, but, I think Entity Framework, it works for a lot of people. Didn't work for me, but works for a lot of people. But otherwise, you can just watch the video and get his full take on it. I haven't watched all 42 minutes, but I watched the first 5 to 6 minutes and it was pretty good. So if you kind of want more of a deeper dive into that blog post, he covers a lot of stuff like, why write once, run everywhere is kind of a false promise. And I think anyone who's tried to do that understands that. But anyway, he talks into more detail about how their architecture is set up and why it does kind of make sense to switch over to a different backend language. Now, I don't know how he feels about C#. I didn't get that far, but at least for me, .NET made a lot of sense as my backend for reasons I already covered. Now, should we talk a little bit about what I did and what I have been prototyping?
Yes. Tell me more about your .NET server-side rendering.
Yeah. So remember, the problem is that you can't support server-side rendering with front-end frameworks specifically. And that is because these frameworks, let's say Astro, Next.js, React Router, they run the server-side code in Node.js, right?
Yep.
And that works. So you have to have a full stack application if you want to use SSR. Now, what you can do, and we've talked about this, is you can use a backend for front-end architecture. And this is something that we did at Target. And so basically what you do is you have front-end Node servers in a cluster, and those support SSR. But then the majority of your business logic and stuff like that is exposed through microservices, and your SSR calls those microservices. So they're invoking web APIs, basically, right? Okay, that's not great. Anyone who's tried to manage infrastructure for backend for front-end architecture knows this, because you're dealing with multiple types of servers. You've got a front-end cluster, and Target deals with thousands. It's a cluster of like 1,000 node servers. Okay, so people are running Node.js in production. All right, it does exist. But then you also have to manage the infrastructure for all the microservices, and then you have to do all the stuff around microservices, all the things that you need to deal with, right? So it's not a lot of fun, but it is viable. You can do that. That's what people do at scale right now. Okay. I don't want to do that. I'm just a solopreneur, right? So ideally, in my ideal, I have my .NET backend server, and I want to be able to run my React server-side code and spit out the server-rendered HTML. Okay, so in order to do that, there's only one way to do that, and that is to run that JavaScript code where it needs to run natively, which is Node.js, right? Or whatever runtime you're using, like, if you're using Bun or Deno, needs to run in that runtime. And there have been packages in the past with .NET where it could spawn a Node.js process, and it could, marshal and do the communication to execute the JavaScript code and return that result back to .NET. Is extremely slow, though, right? Because it's doing a lot of like memory copying and things like that, and it's not very efficient. And that's because Node has not had support for like a foreign function like ABI, which we kind of talked about before. And so there are two things that have changed now in the near past. One is that we figured out how to do in-process communication a bit better. So there is a package or a framework called Edge.js, and that's for .NET, and it does do in-process communication. So there's no spawning of a child process. It's native in-process runtime communication. But I don't know exactly how it works, so I'm not going to talk about that too much. But there's obviously going to be performance overhead. Now, Microsoft has come, and in their semantic kernel tool or library or framework that they've created for their AI tools, they needed a way to do this, to basically call JavaScript from .NET and bidirectionally call .NET from JavaScript. So they have invested in a PR to Node that adds a C-style ABI to it, which means any kind of high-level language that can interop with C code can now interop natively with Node.js, the runtime.
Which is basically everything.
Yeah,
everything
which is basically everything.
ABI.
Exactly. So this package is called NodeAPI.NET, and it's pretty experimental. It's like very new, probably in the past year, I think 2024 or so is when it came about. And it is being used by Microsoft in semantic kernel. And so I used it last week to prototype a way to have React Router running under .NET SSR, and it works. And it's super cool. And the coolest part, too, is that it's more performant than Edge.js because it's using whatever magic with spans and memory and things like that the modern .NET provides. And it does marshalling between types. So there's a couple things that need to work for this to be viable. One is that I need to be able to write my TypeScript code normally without any extra, special stuff and have it execute. And so that works. So like I can write my React Router page and it can render in .NET. If I have a loader, which is the thing that actually runs on the server, I need to be able to call into my .NET shared libraries to be able to invoke code to get data back, like calling my database. Because it doesn't make any sense if I have to call another API on the back end, even though I'm already running on the server. That's like the backend for front end architecture, right? So I don't want that. And I got it working because the way that it works is that you're running in .NET and then it creates a Node.js runtime. So basically V8, right? It creates it in process. So uses the C APIs to create it. So it instantiates a new V8 runtime. It's single-threaded. So it's one thread per request, basically, just like Node. And then it uses the Node API, it's called NAPI or NAPI, to invoke the modules, run the code. I mean, it's all running natively in Node.js, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is when it reaches code that wants to call back into .NET, the CLR, the .NET CLR host is already running. And so all you need to do is marshal the callback to .NET to tell it, here's the function to call. And this library does that for you. So it provides provides an abstraction over that. So it generates some code. It generates the plumbing code to generate a JavaScript module, a generated module that proxies to your .NET code. It supports a lot of the common constructs, like it can translate async tasks in .NET to promises in JavaScript and vice versa.
So cool.
It can translate streams from .NET streams to Node streams, Node.js streams. And so that works. That's actually how I have it supporting React Server components and suspense, because you need to support streaming. And so all I do is I take the readable stream, which is a web API, convert it into a Node stream, because Node has a way to convert from readable, and then pipe that to my .NET stream. And it works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's performant too. So just talking about performance, there's going to be overhead for having a V8 runtime,
mm-hmm.
but it's much more minimal compared to a child process spawning.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's the key thing to highlight here is you get a lot of advantages here because you're not doing like inter-process communication.
Nope.
You're inside the house.
Yes, in process.
Like, you can hand a letter to Mr. Node sitting next to you. Like,
yes.
You're in the same room.
Yep.
So it's really cool.
It's awesome. And so don't want to go too far into it. So I made a video, so you can check out the video, link to it in the show notes. And I have an open source repo, so you can check out where I'm at right now. The prototype is fully working. So React Server components, suspense, React Router 7, React 19, SSR, calling into .NET, .NET rendering SSR. It all works. It works in development and production. So I can run npm run dev under Vite, and in Vite it works. So it's still calling my .NET APIs.
This is the whole reason for like the environments API.
Yes.
In Vite. So
I'm not using that right now, but maybe I should think about that. But anyway, and then when you're ready to run the server, it's npm run build to build the React Router server code, the asset bundle, and then .NET run, and you point it at your server assets, and you got to do a little bit of configuration, and then it's running the server. And so all I really do is I marshal the web request from .NET into the standard web request object, and then I marshal the response object from the web API to .NET responses. And that's basically all I do. So I haven't tested a few things. I haven't tested submitting a different body type, like it only supports like a GET request, like it doesn't do a post right now. So I got to figure that out, but I don't think that's a big deal. I haven't tested like anything more complicated than doing a math, like an addition function. So like I haven't tried testing calling into a database or anything like that. But I think it'll just work as long as the types are not too complex on the return, like on the transition between Node.js and .NET. Those types do need to follow like a subset, but many of them are supported. So as long as it's not too complicated, I think it'll just work because all that code is still executing in native .NET. It's not like it's taking your .NET code and converting it to JavaScript. That's not what it's doing. It's running the native .NET code in the CLR host. And it's doing is creating the glue code to like invoke that and then marshal the types back and forth.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So I really want this to work because I want to use it in my production app. So I'm very motivated to get this working. And I think that it could support stuff beyond React Router. Any kind of front-end framework that exposes a server-side handler that accepts a response or accepts a request and returns a response, it should work. So I think I might need to customize it, for each framework like Astro, SvelteKit, maybe even Next.js, stuff like that. So anyway, But React Router was the simplest to start with because it's so flexible and it's also what I use. So it's, personally motivating. But I think it'll be compatible with anything. It just maybe needs some glue code for that.
Very cool.
And that's also my cool link is my open source repo in the video. So I'll link to those.
My cool link is, and bleepification is out now by Cory Doctorow.
Yes.
So check that out. And he has a great interview with Adam Conover, which we'll link as well.
Cool. Yeah, I just got my notification that book is ready. So I'm going to listen to it and grab it. I got all the copies of it, digital, physical, etc. Okay, so I have to ask about the game jam a little bit because here's the secret. I haven't even played it yet. I know, so it's so offensive, but I will play it. But here's the thing. Now I can ask some questions and maybe this will also help the audience. So did you build it in Excalibur?
I did, yes. I did build it in Excalibur.
That's really cool. Now, were all the members of the team familiar with Excalibur?
Oh, no, none of them were.
Okay.
Now, caveat, I was the only one programming.
Okay.
So like, it wasn't like, Excalibur is so usable that they can pick it up.
Gotcha.
Okay. But it, because like a lot of them were doing the like design and asset type stuff.
Okay.
Which was clutch because I had zero time to do those things.
Yeah, that's really nice. And did you use Trello again to manage the work?
Actually, this time, so normally I would say yes, I would do that 100%. But this time, since I was the only coder, I was just keeping a literal markdown to-do list in the README of the repo and just going as I went along. And it was really helpful because we were like talking as a team. Okay, what's our next priority? Like what, and I'd reorder the list as we were like, nailing it. And I feel pretty good that I scoped it like about 100%, like right. What we could accomplish. Like I only had to cut a few things that were already stretch, but I feel like we did really well on scoping, which is normally not the case. I normally dream pretty big. It's like, oh, what can you do in 72 hours? You're like, I can do 3 times what I think I can do.
Yep.
No.
Well, did you follow the same kind of process that we've done before, where like you define what the minimum viable game is, and you start with that?
Yeah, totally. And
cool.
Like we did the thing where after the first day, you want a playable game loop, right?
Yep.
You want to have something playable at the end of the first day.
Yep.
Like you don't want to be in a situation where you are in day 2 or 3 and you don't have something playable. So it's always important to have something playable as soon as possible.
Yep.
And this, I think, translates to like product development and software development. You want to have something that you can put in front of users so that you can collect feedback. Because a lot of times what you think is going to work when you're done isn't actually what's going to work. Like I am very capable, and I think people are very capable of making logical leaps in their head. But when you're actually playing it, you're like, oh, I didn't think about this, or like when you're using a product, you're like, oh, this doesn't make sense.
Yes.
So it's very important. Even if you have your magnum opus, you have a great vision, it's really important to scale your vision back to an MVP, like viciously cut scope. Like what is the smallest nugget of value? So that's I think one of the, like a thing you can take away from a game jam is it really forces you to do like extreme project management and extreme scopes cutting and be very realistic with yourself. And we did about business hours. I think I was programming from 9 until 6 every day, which is not crazy. We also took an hour-long lunch, and then we went for dinner afterwards, and then I just didn't look at it at night. So like certainly you can burn the midnight oil on a jam, and that is probably the only time that can happen. But we try to keep it pretty sustainable because otherwise it'll floor you.
Okay, so that's super nice because you were all in person, right? And I mean, if you have never done like a game jam before, I do think an in-person jam makes a lot of sense because you'll be able to ask tons of questions and it's just like a bit more exciting and more dynamic and rather than doing a full virtual one for your first one, because then you're kind of alone unless you can find a team. But if you can find an in-person jam event like this, then you can just join a team and you'll, make friends and you'll be able to have conversations and it'll just be a lot more dynamic. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially if you want to, like, I think there's two reasons to do a jam. One, it forces you to make a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're setting aside time that's dedicated to make a thing. And if you've struggled with making things like completing, I think a jam is really good.
Yep.
Two, you can use it as an opportunity to learn something. Like you could be like, I want to actually work outside my skill set, perhaps, like maybe I'm a programmer, but I really want to learn pixel art. It gives you an opportunity to do that in like kind of a high safety situation, because it's the game jam. It's for fun. Now, if you want to participate in your local, I ran this in-person event as part of the Independent Games Developer Association Twin Cities chapter, which was fun. And we reached out to 2DCon HQ, which is a local gaming convention, and they have a space, and they hosted us there.
Cool.
Which was pretty awesome. IGDA also does a global game jam event as well. So that's Ludum Dare and Global Game Jam are both global jams. And there's probably a local meetup near you. But if you're in Minnesota, look us up. And certainly if you're like, I don't want to do either of those, itch.io has a jams page where legit there is like 50 jams happening all the time. So you can pick your thing that you're interested in and you can go and do it. It's a lot of fun. I recommend it. Get some friends together or not, you don't have to, but it's a lot of fun to do it with friends.
Yep. And you can,
it's a great time.
When we've done virtual for like the past 3 or 4 jams, and we use Discord. And so we are on video co-working together, like when people are available. So that does help quite a bit. But we've all had experience doing like an in-person jam before. Anyway, that's pretty sweet. All right. Well, this is probably a good place to end the episode. That's kind of our long goodbye.
Yeah, I think so.
Sweet.
Awesome.
All right. Well, goodbye, folks. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Kamran. I just wanted to thank you for listening to the show, and we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you want to see the show notes, you can check your podcast player or go to typescript.fm, where you'll see a list of all the episodes. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends, and please rate it on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because that's how the show grows and gets discovered by more people. If you want to suggest news or a project that should be covered, or just want to say hi, email us at feedback@typescript.fm. If you want to follow us on social, we're both active on Blue Sky. I'm at kamronigus.com, and Eric is at ericonerheim.com. You can also follow the show directly at typescript.fm.